The blood on her hands wasn't hers. Ayana knelt beside the creek, scrubbing until her knuckles cracked, but the crimson stains had seeped too deep. The water ran pink between her fingers as she whispered prayers her grandmother had taught her, prayers for the dead, prayers for the damned. Behind her, smoke still rose from what remained of the trading post, and somewhere in that ash lay the white man who'd tried to take what wasn't his to claim. She'd killed him with his own knife. The Apache girl pressed her forehead to the cool earth, feeling the weight of exile settle on her shoulders like winter frost. Her own people had cast her out 3 moons ago, half-breed, they'd called her, neither white enough for the settlers nor Apache enough for the tribe. The trading post had been her last refuge, washing dishes for scraps and a place to sleep, until today, until he'd cornered her in the storeroom with whiskey on his breath and violence in his eyes. Should have let him finish what he started. The voice made her spin, water dripping from her trembling hands. A man sat his horse 20 yards away, hat pulled low, watching her with eyes the color of winter sky. He was tall, weathered, with silver threading through dark hair and scars mapping his knuckles. Thomas Brennan. She knew him by reputation, the rancher who'd lost his wife to fever 2 summers past, who'd been raising his daughter alone ever since. You saw, her voice cracked like dry timber, saw enough. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching on gravel. Jimmy Cortez won't be missed, if that's what you're asking. But the law won't see it that way, not when it's an Apache girl's word against a dead white man's reputation. Ayana's hand moved instinctively to the knife at her belt, clean now but forever marked. Then I'll run. I'm good at running. Where to? Brennan stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and tobacco on his clothes. Your people don't want you. White towns'll hang you on sight, and winter's coming hard this year. The truth hit like a physical blow. She had nowhere left to go, no one left to turn to. The creek bubbled past her feet, carrying away the last traces of Jimmy Cortez's blood, carrying away her last hope of disappearing into the wilderness. Why do you care what happens to me? Brennan studied her face with those pale eyes, seeing something she'd never dared name. When he spoke, his voice was gentle as morning rain, because everybody deserves a choice about how their story ends. The ride to Brennan's ranch stretched 15 miles through country that knew her scent, her history, her shame. Ayana rode behind him on a borrowed mare, feeling every mile like a step deeper into a trap she couldn't see. The rancher hadn't spoken since they'd left the creek, but she felt his presence like a shield between her and the hostile world. His ranch sprawled across a valley floor, neat and prosperous, with cattle dotting the grassland like scattered coins. The house sat solid and square, windows glowing warm against the approaching dusk. A young girl, maybe 12 summers, burst from the front door, blonde braids flying. Papa. She stopped short when she saw Ayana, blue eyes widening. Who's that? This is Ayana, Brennan said, dismounting. She'll be staying with us for a while. An Indian. The girl's voice carried curiosity, not fear. A real Apache. Half, Ayana corrected, sliding from her horse. The unwanted half. Brennan's daughter stepped closer, studying her with the fearless intensity of youth. I'm Sarah. Are you hungry? Mrs. Henderson made stew before she went home. Before Ayana could answer, hoofbeats thundered up the drive. 3 riders emerged from the gathering darkness. Sheriff Morgan and his deputies, badges glinting in the lamplight. Ayana's hand moved toward her knife, but Brennan caught her wrist. Easy, he murmured. Tom Brennan, the sheriff called, staying mounted. Heard you might have seen something unusual today. Jimmy Cortez got himself killed down at Holden's trading post, butchered like a hog. That's so. Brennan's voice remained level. What's that got to do with me? Tracks leading away from the scene. Unshod horse, Indian pony. You know anything about that? Ayana felt the moment balance on a knife's edge. One word from Brennan would end this and end her. She waited for him to step aside, to let justice take its natural course. That's what any reasonable man would do. Instead, he moved between her and the sheriff's rifles. Can't say I do, Bill. Been working cattle all day with my hands. You're welcome to ask them. Sheriff Morgan's eyes found Ayanna standing in the lamplight, and she saw recognition flicker across his weathered features. That wouldn't be Spotted Wolf's girl, would it? The half-breed. This is my housekeeper, Brennan said quietly. Has been for months. The lie dropped between them like a stone into still water. Sarah looked confused, but she stayed silent, sensing the danger crackling in the air. The deputies shifted in their saddles, hands resting near their guns. Funny thing about housekeepers, Tom, they usually don't show up covered in blood. Ayanna's breath caught. In the lamplight, the stains on her dress were unmistakable. Rabbit, Brennan said without missing a beat. Sarah wanted to learn proper skinning, made a mess of it. He smiled at his daughter. Didn't we, honey? Sarah nodded eagerly. It was awful, Sheriff Morgan. Blood everywhere. The sheriff studied them for a long moment, weighing truth against convenience. Finally he touched his hat brim. Well then, sorry to disturb your evening, Tom, but if you hear anything. He let the threat hang unfinished as he wheeled his horse toward the gate. When the hoofbeats faded into darkness, Ayanna finally found her voice. Why? Brennan looked at her with those winter sky eyes, and she saw something there she'd never expected to find in a white man's face. Compassion. 3 days passed like held breath. Ayanna moved through Brennan's house like a ghost, cooking, cleaning, mending Sarah's torn dresses with fingers that remembered her grandmother's patient teachings. The girl followed her everywhere, chattering about school and horses and the mother she barely remembered, treating Ayanna like the sister she'd never had. But outside the ranch's boundaries, the territory seethed with rumors. They're saying things in town, Mrs. Henderson whispered, when she brought supplies from Copper Creek. The older woman had been skeptical of Tom's new housekeeper, but gradually warmed to Ayanna's quiet competence. About Jimmy Cortez, about Apache raids. Some folks are talking about forming a posse. Ayanna's hands stilled on the bread dough. What kind of talk? The dangerous kind. Bill Morgan's trying to keep heads cool, but there's men in town who see an Indian killing as an excuse for reprisals. That evening, as Ayanna helped Sarah with her letters by lamplight, Brennan sat cleaning his rifle. The weapon's oiled steel gleamed in the flickering light, and she noticed he'd added extra cartridges to his belt. You expecting trouble? She asked. In my experience, trouble comes whether you expect it or not. He looked up from the rifle's action. Question is whether you're ready for it. Her answer came with the dawn. Ayanna woke to the sound of horses, too many horses, moving too fast. She slipped from her bed and peered through the window to see riders cresting the hill. At least a dozen men silhouetted against the pale sky. Some wore badges, others wore bandanas, pulled up over their faces. Tom. Her urgent whisper woke him instantly. Years of frontier living had trained him to sleep light. He joined her at the window, cursing softly when he saw the approaching riders. Take Sarah to the root cellar, lock it from inside and don't come out no matter what you hear. I won't hide while you will. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, because if they take you they'll kill you slow, and they'll make Sarah watch. The girl appeared in her nightgown, rubbing sleepy eyes. Papa, what's wrong? Just a precaution, honey. Brennan lifted his daughter into his arms, his voice gentle despite the rifles glinting in the sunrise. Remember the game we practiced, the hiding game? Sarah nodded solemnly. She'd been frontier-born. She understood danger even if she couldn't name it. Ayanna followed them to the kitchen, where Brennan pulled aside a rug to reveal a hidden trapdoor. The root cellar below was stocked with provisions and weapons, a refuge built by a man who'd learned that safety was always temporary. There's a tunnel that leads to the barn, he told Ayanna quietly. If something happens to me, take Sarah and ride for the territorial capital. Don't stop, don't look back. Thomas me. She met his eyes and saw her own desperation reflected there. This man who barely knew her was willing to die for her. The thought cut deeper than any blade. I promise. Above them, boots thundered onto the porch. A fist hammered the door with the authority of assumed righteousness. Tom Brennan, we know you got her in there. Send out the Apache girl, and nobody else has to get hurt. Brennan checked his rifle one final time, then looked down at Ayanna with something that might have been love. Whatever happens up there, Remember, you belong here now. You're not running anymore." He closed the trap door, sealing them in darkness just as the front door exploded inward. The root cellar smelled of earth and preservation, of winter preparations and buried hope. Above their heads, voices raised in anger, demanding, threatening. Ayana held Sarah close in the darkness, feeling the girl's small body trembling against her chest. "Is Papa going to be okay?" Sarah's whisper was barely audible. "Your father is the strongest man I know," Ayana replied, surprised by the truth in her own words. In 3 days, Thomas Brennan had shown her more kindness than she'd received in a lifetime of wandering. Boots stomped across the kitchen floor directly above them. Someone overturned furniture. Glass shattered, probably her grandmother's medicine bottles, the only possessions she'd managed to save from her exile. "Where is she, Tom?" The voice belonged to Deputy Harris, a man whose hatred of Indians was well known throughout the territory. "We tracked her here. We know she's in this house. I told Bill Morgan the truth." Brennan's voice remained steady despite the circumstances. "My housekeeper's been here for months. You boys are wasting your time." Bullshit. This from someone Ayana didn't recognize. "Jimmy Cortez died with Apache steel in his gut. That girl's got blood on her hands." "Jimmy Cortez died because he was a drunk and a fool," Brennan replied calmly. "If you want to blame someone for that, blame the man who sold him the whiskey." In the darkness, Sarah pressed something into Ayana's palm, a small carved horse, worn smooth by countless nights of childhood comfort. "Mama made this for me before she died," the girl whispered. "Papa says she watches over us. Maybe she'll watch over you too." The simple gift broke something open in Ayana's chest. She'd spent so long believing herself unwanted, unclaimed, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be offered unconditional love. This child, who barely knew her story, was willing to share her most precious possession. "Tell me about your mama," Ayana whispered, needing to focus on something besides the violence brewing overhead. "She had yellow hair like mine, but her eyes were brown like yours. Papa says she could sing birds from the trees. She used to tell me stories about brave princesses who saved their kingdoms." Above them, someone fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Dust rained down through the floorboards. "Last chance, Tom. Hand her over, or we take this house apart board by board." "Then you better get started," Brennan replied. "Because I got all day." Sarah's small hand found Ayana's in the darkness. "You're brave like the princesses in Mama's stories. You saved yourself from that bad man, didn't you?" "I tried to. That's what brave people do. They try, even when they're scared." The wisdom of children often cuts deeper than adult philosophy. Ayana felt tears track down her cheeks as she held Sarah's carved horse. This gift from a dead woman's daughter, offered to a woman the world had discarded. "I was so alone before I came here," she admitted. "I thought nobody would ever want me around. Papa wants you. I can tell by the way he looks at you, like he looked at Mama. And I want you too. You teach me things and you don't treat me like I'm just a little kid." More shouting from upstairs, followed by the distinctive sound of furniture being overturned. They were searching the house room by room, growing more desperate and dangerous with each empty space. "Sarah," Ayana whispered urgently, "if something happens, if those men find us, you run to that tunnel your papa showed me. You ride to town and find Sheriff Morgan. Tell him what really happened." "What about you?" Ayana closed her eyes, feeling the weight of inevitable choice settling on her shoulders. "I've been running my whole life. Maybe it's time to stop." The trapdoor above them creaked ominously. Someone had found the hidden entrance. The trapdoor lifted slowly, revealing Deputy Harris silhouetted against the kitchen's lamplight. His rifle pointed down into the darkness where Ayana and Sarah huddled together. Well, Tom Brennan's new housekeeper." His voice dripped with satisfaction. "Come on up, girl, nice and easy." Ayana squeezed Sarah's hand once, then stood. "Stay down here," she murmured to the girl. "Remember what I told you." She climbed the wooden steps with her head high, facing the dozen armed men who filled Brennan's kitchen. Some wore badges of questionable authority, others were simply townsmen drunk on righteous anger and territorial whiskey. At their center stood Thomas Brennan,
hands zip-tied behind his back, blood trickling from a split lip. "There she is," Harris announced. "Jimmy Cortez's killer." "I killed Jimmy Cortez," Ayanna said clearly. "But not for the reasons you think." "Don't matter the reasons," said a voice from the crowd. "Apache killed a white man, that's all we need to know." "She's not Apache." Brennan's voice cut through the murmur of agreement. "Look at her, really look." Harris grabbed Ayanna's chin, forcing her face toward the lamplight. Her mixed heritage was written in her features, the high cheekbones and dark eyes of her mother's people, but also the narrow nose and lighter skin that marked her father's blood. "Half-breed," someone spat. "Half-Irish," Brennan corrected. "Her father was Patrick O'Sullivan from County Cork. Came west in '49, worked my father's ranch before I was born. Good man, honest man." Ayanna stared at him in shock. She'd never known her father's name, never known anything about the white man who'd loved her Apache mother long enough to give her life but not long enough to claim her. "You knew him, well, you got his eyes, his stubborn chin. He died defending this ranch from raiders when you were still in swaddling clothes. Your mother took you back to her people after the funeral." The revelation hung in the air like smoke. Ayanna felt pieces of her identity shifting, reforming into something new. She wasn't just a cast-off half-breed, she was the daughter of a man who died with honor, defending the land she now stood on. "That don't change nothing," Harris growled. "She still killed. She killed a rapist." Sarah's clear voice interrupted from the cellar entrance. The 12-year-old climbed the steps with her chin set in determined lines that mirrored her father's. "I heard Mrs. Henderson talking. Jimmy Cortez hurt other women too, Indian women, women who couldn't fight back." "Sarah, get back downstairs," Brennan commanded. "No, Papa." The girl moved to stand beside Ayanna, small and fierce. "She's family now. Family protects each other." The simple declaration shifted something in the room's atmosphere. Several of the townsmen looked uncomfortable, remembering their own daughters, their own wives. Deputy Harris sensed the change and raised his rifle. "Don't matter what he did or didn't do. Law's the law. Then let the law decide." Sheriff Morgan's voice carried from the doorway, where he stood with two territorial marshals. "Real law, not mob justice." Harris spun toward his superior. "Bill, we got her dead to rights. You got a scared girl who defended herself from a known predator."
Oh.
Morgan stepped into the kitchen, his presence filling the space with legitimate authority. "Talked to some folks in Holden's Creek. Seems Jimmy Cortez had quite a reputation. Amazing how people remember things when they're not afraid anymore." The sheriff's eyes found Ayanna's. "Self-defense is legal, even for Indian girls, especially when there's witnesses." "What witnesses?" Harris demanded. "Traveling preacher saw the whole thing through the trading post window. Been looking for someone to tell ever since. Seems Jimmy Cortez attacked first, with a knife. Girl just defended herself." The lie was beautifully crafted, impossible to disprove. Ayanna saw Morgan's slight nod and understood that sometimes justice required its servants to bend the truth. One by one the vigilantes filed out of the kitchen, their bloodlust cooled by the presence of legitimate law. Harris lingered longest, hatred burning in his eyes, but eventually he too left. When they were alone, Brennan turned to Ayanna with wonder in his winter sky eyes. "Patrick O'Sullivan's daughter," he said softly. "I should have seen it sooner. Does it matter who my father was?" "Matters to me. Means you belong here by right, not just by my word." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and tobacco, and something else, something like hope. "You're not running anymore. Ayanna O'Sullivan." The name felt strange on her tongue, but right, like coming home to a place she'd never been. 5 years later Sarah Brennan would write in her diary, "Today Ayanna and Papa got married in the little church in Copper Creek. She wore Mama's dress, the white one with the pearl buttons. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, nobody said a word. Even Deputy Harris just sat there, looking like he'd swallowed something sour." After the ceremony, Ayanna whispered something to Papa in Apache, and he smiled the way he used to smile at Mama. I asked her later what she'd said, and she told me, "I said thank you for claiming me." Then she hugged me tight and said I was the best sister a girl could ask for. I think Mama would have liked her. I think Mama would have wanted Papa to be happy again. The ranch still stands today, passed down through generations of Brennan O'Sullivans. If you know where to look, you can still see the root cellar where a frightened girl learned what it meant to be claimed by love instead of violence. The locals say on quiet nights, you can hear Apache prayers mixing with Irish lullabies on the wind. Two cultures, two peoples, forever woven together by the simple truth that everyone deserves to belong somewhere.